Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're opening up a really remarkable piece of research.
Yeah, it connects global economics, stuff we think about every day, directly to ecological disaster.
All kind of under the guise of convenience, which is fascinating. This is our deep dive into the unexpected environmental costs of globalization, specifically looking through the lens of invasive species management.
Mhm.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Our source today is a 2009 Editor's Perspective Special Profile. It's from the Journal of Applied Ecology,
Right.
and the title is Trade, Transport, and Trouble: Managing Invasive Species Pathways in an Era of Globalization. The author is Philip E. Hulme.
And Holmes' paper, it provides this really stunning argument. He basically says that the two things we tend to celebrate most about globalization,
Which would be?
unprecedented income growth, globally, and the just incredible logistical efficiency of transport these days.
Right, getting things anywhere fast.
Exactly. He argues those are the primary fuel sources for this escalating biological invasion crisis.
Well,
So our goal here is to understand his synthesis of the problem, how he puts it all together, and then really dive deep into the specific solutions he reviews.
which are state-of-the-art approaches, right?
Yeah, state-of-the-art at the time, focusing on pathway risk assessment, or PRA. It's about managing the routes.
Okay, PRA. We'll get into that. But first, just so we're all on the same page, when we talk about alien species,
Mm.
what exactly are we defining here?
Good point. So basically, any taxa that's plants, animals, fungi, whatever, that got moved outside its normal natural range.
By humans.
By humans, yeah.
Yeah.
Either intentionally, like bringing crops or pets, or unintentionally, like stowaways and cargo.
And these are the ones that manage to establish new populations far from home, often causing, well, trouble for native ecosystems.
That's the crucial part, the establishment and the impact. See, humans have been moving species around for, like, millennia.
Sure, farming, exploration.
Exactly. But Holmes' work is really critical because it puts a timeline on how this whole problem accelerated. He pinpoints three distinct step changes in history, periods where the frequency and the sheer magnitude of invasions suddenly just spiked.
Wait, so you're saying he doesn't just start with, like, the Industrial Revolution, steamships and canals. He goes back further.
Way further, phase one, he dates it to the end of the Middle Ages, around 1500 AD.
Okay, what was happening then?
Think global exploration, the quote-unquote rediscovery of the Americas, the beginning of widespread colonialism.
Ah, okay. So establishing the first truly global trade and transport routes.
Precisely. It laid the foundation, the network for everything that came later.
Right. The initial pathways are carved out. Then we get to phase two. That starts around 1800 AD.
Yep. Lines up perfectly with the chaos, but also the efficiency of the Industrial Revolution.
And what changed then?
This period marks a progressive, really distinct acceleration. We're
Right.
talking annual rates of alien introductions, mammals, plants, invertebrates.
All sorts of things.
Yeah, across North America especially. And it was driven by that transformative infrastructure, steamships, canals, early highways,
Things moving faster and further.
and people moving too. Maybe most importantly, the massive emigration, 50 million Europeans between, say, 1820 and 1930.
Wow, 50 million.
And they weren't just bringing suitcases, they were bringing their associated species with them, intentionally or not.
Which brings us right up to today. Phase three. The era of globalization. And Holmes' paper says the highest rates of introductions have been in the last, 25 years?
That's the really sobering part. This is the new modern step change. And it's kind of terrifying because the velocity of trade now, it just outpaces our ability to even detect these things sometimes.
So we're introducing things faster than we can track them.
That's the central observation, yeah. And this newest acceleration is driven by two measurable interconnected factors.
Oh, how are they?
Unprecedented growth in global income and the revolutionary efficiency of modern transport logistics.
And here's where it gets really interesting, right? Because Holmes doesn't just keep the economy and the ecology separate here.
Not at all, they're intertwined.
So when we look at those two main drivers, income and transport, how clearly does the data actually link them to this invasion problem? Let's start with the money, with income growth.
Oh, it's very clear. There's a strong global association between a nation's gross domestic product, its GDP, and the richness, meaning the number of different types of its alien flora and fauna.
So wealthier countries tend to have more established alien species, plants, birds, fish, spiders.
Generally, yes. And specifically, merchandise imports are a leading determinant, the more stuff a country imports.
The higher the risk.
Exactly. And what's fascinating here is the geography of it. This link between alien plant richness and GDP. It's significantly stronger for island states than for continents.
Really? Why islands specifically?
Well, think about it. Islands often have to rely much more heavily on external trade, right? Merchandise imports make up something like 38% of island GDP compared to just under 27% for continents.
So they're importing a bigger chunk of their economy.
Precisely. Which makes their ecosystems kind of like the canary in the coal mine. They're often the most invaded and the most threatened globally, partly because they're forced to import so much.
So we're essentially, maybe unintentionally, trading biodiversity for economic growth, especially on islands.
That's a stark way to put it, but yeah.
And we see this link quite clearly in specific consumer demands, right? The paper mentions things like horticulture, the pet trade.
Yep, horticulture, the wild bird trade, massive grain shipments, the aquarium fish commerce, all these directly link specific human commodity sectors to, subsequent alien species getting established.
Which highlights the dilemma.
Totally. Despite this striking evidence linking economic growth directly to invasions, the scope to really address this financially, it's limited.
Why is that?
Because, well, in global accounting, nature's capital, the value of ecosystems, biodiversity, it's just massively undervalued by mainstream growth economists and governments.
So you don't price in the cost of an invasion when you're calculating GDP growth.
Exactly. So the economic growth looks great, uninhibited, but there's this huge hidden ecological cost.
The ultimate hidden cost. Okay, let's move to the second driver then. Transport efficiency. You said technical and logistical improvements after 1950 really sped things up.
Dramatically. Global shipping got incredibly easy, incredibly efficient, but the downside is it hindered traceability and our ability to intercept pests. It's faster, but it's also more opaque.
And the scale is just mind-boggling. Over 90% of global trade carried by sea, 50,000 ships.
Yeah, and global imports have increased fourfold just since the 1970s. The volume is immense.
And the standard unit of that cargo is the shipping container.
Dumble container, yeah.
Global loaded container trade hit 141 million TEUs. Those are the 20-foot equivalent units back in 2007. And the problem there is novel, right? It's not just what's in the box.
Exactly. Alien species can be stowaways inside the container, sure, but also on the surface of the container itself, like insects or seeds stuck to the outside.
So it's like this giant used suitcase traveling the world.
That's a great analogy. And to really assess the risk, you ideally need to know the entire travel history of that container, not just the goods it happens to be holding on this particular trip.
Which sounds incredibly difficult logistically.
It is. Now contrast sea freight with air freight. International air freight increased eightfold between 1970 and 2005.
Okay, still huge growth.
Huge growth, but remember, air transport is a tiny, tiny fraction of the total cargo volume compared to ships.
Right.
But aviation is the major form of international passenger transport.
Ah, so it's about the people moving.
People and their baggage. And listen to this statistic on interception rates. Airports are way more numerous than seaports, right? About 20 times more worldwide.
Okay.
And get this, 73% of the 725,000 pest interceptions at U.S. ports between 1984 and 2000, they happened at airports.
That's 53%.
And crucially, they found twice as many pests in passenger baggage as they did in air cargo itself.
Wow. That really highlights that we, the travelers, not just the products, are a massive part of the pathway risk.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But going back to shipping for a second, maybe the biggest risk is often totally independent of the actual cargo being shipped.
How so?
Aquatic species. They stow away either by fouling the hulls, growing on the outside of the ship.
Like barnacles and algae?
Exactly. Or, and this is critical, in ballast water. The water ships take on for stability.
Right. They pump it in one port and dump it in another.
And the estimates suggest something terrifying, like 10,000 different species are being transported via ballast water every single day.
10,000 species a day. That number just feels overwhelming. How can you possibly manage that?
Well, that overwhelming number makes it pretty clear that creating comprehensive, completely watertight global trade regulations that stop everything, it's probably impossible, or at least incredibly difficult and expensive.
So what's the alternative?
The alternative, the current frontline strategy that Hulme highlights, is to pivot. Instead of trying to block every species, you focus on managing the diverse routes of introduction, the pathways themselves.
Okay, pathway risk assessment, PRA.
That's where PRA becomes essential.
This PRA methodology, it sounds pretty complex. You mentioned bringing together spatial data.
Yeah, it involves layering lots of information. Spatial data on climate suitability, like could this species survive here? Habitat availability, is there the right environment? Points of entry, where are things
The
arriving?
ports, airports.
Exactly. And then you integrate that with models of how species disperse, how much propagule pressure there is.
Propagule pressure, meaning how many individuals arrive, how often.
Yeah, the number, frequency, and spatial extent of introductions. You put all that together to generate these risk maps.
Maps that show managers where the invasion hotspots are likely to be.
Precisely. So you can target surveillance and control efforts much more effectively.
Makes sense. Focus resources.
Right. And the profile dives into case studies of 4 key unintentional pathways identified using PRA: contaminant, stowaway, corridor, and unaided.
Okay, let's break those down. Some of the findings are counterintuitive, you said.
Yeah, it's some really challenged traditional management thinking. Let's start with the contaminant pathway. This is where the alien species is mixed in with the goods.
Like pests on imported products.
Exactly. The example used is phytosanitary pests on raw logs, like the European spruce bark beetle, Ips typographus.
Okay, a forest pest. What did they find?
The researchers, Scarpas and Eklund, they reached this really shocking conclusion about managing the risk. They looked at all sorts of measures:
Like what?
reducing the import volume, changing the timing, importing in winter versus summer, processing logs sooner or later, irrigation, debarking the logs, warehouse storage, lots of things.
Okay, standard approaches.
But the surprising thing was, managing the volume and the timing of the import, it had the least effect on reducing the pest establishment risk.
Wait. Volume didn't matter much? That seems completely counterintuitive. Surely fewer logs means fewer beetles.
You think so? But no. The measure that had the most consistent, significant impact on reducing risk was increasing the spatial distance between where the timber was stored and the nearest suitable forest habitat.
Distance. Just keeping it further away from the forest.
Exactly. Distance, not volume, was the key factor. The thinking is you need that spatial separation. If you unload infested logs right next to a healthy forest, even a few beetles can easily make the jump.
Right.
But if those logs are stored, say, 50 miles away in some industrial lot, most beetles attempting to disperse will just die before they reach suitable habitat.
So it shifts the focus from customs inspectors counting logs to, like, land use planners deciding where storage sites go.
Precisely. It's a major reframing of where the effective control point is.
That is a big shift. Okay, what about the next one? The stowaway pathway. This is where the vectors themselves are the problem.
Right. The classic example is hull fouling on ships, especially recreational yachts, spreading things like that invasive tunicate, Pidemnum vacillum.
Sea screw, yeah. Nasty stuff.
Nasty stuff. And here, the critical factor for PRA is understanding the vector traffic. How often do boats move between places? And what's the network connectivity? Which places are the major hubs?
Because boats moving from busy marina to busy marina will spread things faster.
Exactly. High traffic nodes, these hubs, they give rise to more satellite populations much faster. So the risk maps integrate these vector dynamics with environmental suitability models.
Again, telling managers where to look first.
Yeah, target your surveys, target eradication campaigns where the risk is highest based on boat movement patterns and suitability.
Got it. Next up, the corridor pathway. This focuses on infrastructure, roads, railways.
Yeah, how linear infrastructure acts like a highway for alien species. The example here is earthworm invasion in northern Canada.
Earthworms. Aren't they good for soil?
Well, not always, especially not in ecosystems that evolve without them, like parts of the boreal forest. They can really change the soil structure and nutrient cycling.
Huh. Okay, so how do roads play a role?
Researchers Cameron and Bain found that earthworm occurrence wasn't just correlated with climate or distance to agriculture, but significantly with road age.
Road age, not just the presence of a road.
Road age. Earthworms spread farther out from older roads. But, and this is key, only where there was also reduced forest cover along the road.
Wow. So that 50-year-old highway cutting through the woods isn't just a road for cars, it's potentially an invasion superhighway for earthworms, especially if the roadside isn't dense forest.
That's the idea. The older the disturbance, the more established the pathway.
That's wild. So what's the management implication there? You can't exactly unbuild old roads.
No, but they suggest maybe modifying the roadside environment itself. For instance, maybe planting trees that are inhospitable to earthworms, like black spruce, right along the corridor.
Creating a biological barrier along the road edge.
Kind of, yeah, trying to slow that spread from the corridor into the surrounding habitat.
Interesting. Okay, last one. The unaided pathway. What's that?
This pathway addresses the natural spread after a species has been introduced and established somewhere. It's how it moves on its own from that initial point, and it's often dangerously underestimated.
We focus too much on the initial arrival.
Sometimes, yeah.
Yeah.
We might stop it at the port, but if it's already established inland, how does it move next? This led to a novel concept from Forrest and colleagues, the idea of internal borders.
Internal borders, meaning within a country or region.
Exactly. Identifying natural environmental barriers, things like major mountain ranges, big lakes, or ocean currents, watershed boundaries, things that naturally impede spread.
Okay, natural obstacles.
And the method involves using things like least cost modeling. You assign dispersal costs to different landscape features, like it's costly for a forest species to cross a desert.
Right.
This helps calculate the most likely invasion routes across the landscape. And crucially, it helps identify gaps or weak points in those natural barriers.
Like mountain passes or canals cutting through watersheds or tunnels under ranges.
Exactly. Those specific gaps become the priorities for surveillance and maybe management, like installing barriers or early detection systems.
Focusing effort on the choke points in the natural landscape.
That's the idea.
So, stepping back then, what does this all mean? The common thread I'm hearing across all these pathway examples is this shift towards viewing invasions as intensely spatial processes.
Absolutely. It's moving beyond just listing species A, B, and C and focusing on the geography. Where are they coming from? Where are they likely to arrive? How are they likely to spread once they're here? Generating these integrated risk maps is key.
But you mentioned propagal pressure earlier, that measure of how many arrive, how often. It's used in these models, but you suggested we need to be cautious about it.
Yeah, we need to be a bit careful there. Propagal pressure, the number, frequency, spatial extent of introductions. It's often just assumed that more pressure automatically means a higher likelihood of establishment. More arrivals, more success.
Makes intuitive sense.
It does, but the evidence Hulme reviews is actually pretty mixed. It's context dependent.
Oh.
Well, remember Scarpas and Akeland, the bark beetle researchers?
Yeah, where distance mattered more than volume.
Right. They explicitly modeled something called an alley effect for the beetles. That means the beetles actually need a high density, a high number of individuals arriving together just to overcome defenses and get established. So for them, pressure is critical.
Okay, so number matters there.
But then other researchers, Sagata and Lester, looked at the Argentine ant, a really successful invader. They found propagal pressure actually had low predictive power for its establishment.
Really? For the Argentine ant? Why?
Possibly because it has high behavioral plasticity, it's adaptable, maybe doesn't need huge numbers to start a colony, it can make do.
Okay.
And another study on the aquatic weed Hydrola verticillata found propagal pressure was only really important for its establishment in the absence of competition from native species. If natives were strong, volume didn't help Hydrola as much.
So the role of sheer numbers, of propagal pressure, it really depends on the specific species, its biology, and the environment it's invading.
Exactly. It's not a universal rule. You can't just assume more imports always equals more established invaders in a simple, linear way. It's complex.
Which brings us to, I guess, a crucial limitation noted in the paper itself. Most of these models, even the sophisticated PRA ones, they focus mainly on describing the likelihood of an invader establishing.
Right. They're getting better and better at predicting if or where an invasion is likely to happen.
Which is valuable, but
But it doesn't always directly tell you the best thing to do about it.
yeah.
The future focus, Hulme argues, really has to shift towards modeling explicit management strategies.
Moving from prediction to prescription.
Exactly. Ensuring the research actually informs action. We need models that help answer questions like, what's the optimal detection strategy? Where should we put inspectors? How effective is fumigation versus, say, open sea ballast water exchange?
Comparing different interventions.
Yeah, assessing the effectiveness of different measures like creating pest exclusion zones around sensitive areas or building specific dispersal barriers based on those internal border analyses. We need the science to guide the doing.
So the ultimate challenge, really, as this paper lays out so clearly, is that in this era of rapid globalization, The task isn't just about identifying the huge scale of the problem anymore.
We know it's huge.
We know it's huge. It's about adapting our science and our management strategies so they can actually move at the speed of commerce and logistics.
Regulators almost need to become spatial ecologists, thinking constantly about pathways and connectivity.
Yeah, it requires a whole different way of thinking.
And maybe that leads us to a final, kind of provocative thought, building directly on this material.
Okay, leave us with something to chew on.
Well, given that counterintuitive finding for the spruce bark beetle, remember, spatial distance from the forest mattered more than the sheer volume of imported timber.
Right, the location of the storage site was key.
Exactly. So we have to ask ourselves, what currently benign-looking piece of infrastructure in your own region? Maybe it's a relatively new highway interchange. Maybe it's an old, seemingly abandoned rail line. Maybe it's a canal connecting two river systems. What infrastructure might actually be functioning silently as a long-term corridor?
Something that's accelerating future invasions right under our noses.
Potentially. What's the hidden, maybe permanent environmental cost of that particular convenience, that particular piece of infrastructure that we just haven't priced in or even recognized yet?